The stage is bathed in the cool glow of overhead lights, the long tables set with microphones and water bottles. A thick hum of whispered speculation fills the cavernous conference hall, punctuated by the occasional rustle of notepads and the sharp clicks of camera shutters. The air carries a quiet electricity, the kind that precedes either a revelation or a confrontation. Warren Buffett steps onto the stage with his usual unhurried gait, his suit crisp but unpretentious. In his hand, a familiar red can of Diet Coke. He sets it down with a quiet clink, his fingers lightly drumming the table before he leans back in his chair. His expression is unreadable, neither amused nor bored, just watchful. The moderators exchange a glance before the lead journalist, a woman in a sharp black blazer, speaks into her microphone. "Welcome, Mr. Buffett. As always, we appreciate your insights. Let's begin with..." She's cut off by a burst of camera flashes as latecomers squeeze into the packed rows of seats. Financial analysts, journalists, and economists from around the world sit shoulder to shoulder, some with pens poised over notepads, others ready to fire off tweets at lightning speed. Buffett, ever the veteran of high-pressure rooms, only smiles. "Looks like we've got a full house today." A polite chuckle ripples through the audience, but the tension doesn't ease. Everyone is here for the usual, the state of the markets, inflation predictions, and perhaps a rare insight into Berkshire Hathaway's next big move. But no one in the room has any idea that the most important moment of the day will come not from a seasoned journalist or a Wall Street strategist, but from someone completely unexpected. The moderator clears her throat. "Mr. Buffett, let's start with a question on recent economic trends." Then from somewhere in the crowd, a small voice rises. "Excuse me?" It's soft but unwavering. The room hesitates. The moderator turns her head, slightly annoyed. By the interruption, a young girl, no older than 12, stands up near the middle row. The journalists around her glance at each other, confused by her presence in a sea of professionals. A few chuckle under their breath. She shouldn't be here, but Buffett doesn't laugh. He leans forward, intrigued. "Well, this is new." The moderator hesitates, then, with a raised eyebrow, gestures for her to speak. The girl grips the microphone with both hands. "Mr. Buffett," she says, her voice steady despite the sea of eyes now on her. "What does it really mean to be rich?" At the room falls into absolute silence. Cameras stop clicking. Journalists lower their pens. No one expected that. The murmur of the crowd shifts from calculated whispers to a soft wave of confusion as heads turn toward the unexpected speaker. In a sea of sharp suits and seasoned professionals, she stands, out like a misplaced piece in a carefully arranged puzzle. She can't be more than 12. Her dark hair is neatly combed, falling just past her shoulders, and she wears a plain white dress with a denim jacket slightly too big for her frame. Her eyes, wide and earnest, dart toward Buffett, then back down at the microphone she grips tightly in both hands. A few scattered chuckles ripple through the room, journalists exchanging amused glances. Some assume she's a guest's daughter, who accidentally ended up with a microphone. Others think it's a stunt, some PR trick to humanize the event. Buffett, however, doesn't smile. He doesn't dismiss her like the others. Instead, he leans forward, resting his hands on the table, his head slightly tilted in curiosity. The moderator hesitates, clearly thrown off. This was not in the agenda. She scans the room, half expecting security to step in, but nothing happens. A long pause stretches between them before, finally, she sighs and gestures toward the girl. "Go ahead," she says, her voice a mix of reluctance and curiosity. The girl swallows, her small fingers tightening around the mic. Her voice, though, soft, carries a quiet strength. "Mr. Buffett," she says, locking eyes with him, "what does it really mean to be rich?" Silence. It crashes over the room, heavy and unexpected. Pens stop scribbling. Reporters stop typing. The usual rehearsed back and forth of financial debates screeches to a halt. Buffett doesn't respond immediately. He simply looks at her, studying the question in a way that makes the air feel heavier. The moderator shifts uncomfortably. A journalist near the front snorts under his breath, but the girl doesn't back down. She doesn't laugh nervously or glance around for approval. She just waits. And Warren Buffett, legendary investor, billionaire, a man who has built empires, suddenly finds himself at a rare loss for words. The words settle over the room like a fog, soft yet undeniable. Warren Buffett's name has been tied to wealth for decades. He's fielded every question imaginable about money, market trends, investment strategies, economic downturns, and billion-dollar deals. He's debated analysts, advised presidents, and outmaneuvered rivals. But this question is different. He studies the girl, his sharp mind quickly assessing her. There's no sign of nerves, no awkward fidgeting. She's not reading from a cue card, not reciting something scripted. Her hands grip the microphone tightly, but her eyes, wide, steady, hold nothing but pure curiosity. For the first time in the entire press conference, no one is typing, no one is whispering, no one is shifting in their seat. They are all waiting. A veteran Wall Street journalist near the front lowers his pen, his mouth slightly open. A CNBC correspondent exchanges glances with his producer. This wasn't the kind of question they'd come for. Buffett exhales, barely perceptible. His fingers tap the table once, twice. He could, if he wanted to, pivot, turn this into a lesson on financial literacy, tell a witty anecdote, or throw back a clever response to earn a few laughs. Instead, something in his expression changes. The sharp businessman's edge softens just slightly. He leans forward, resting his forearms on the table. "That," he says slowly, his voice carrying a weight that makes the girl tighten her grip on the microphone, "is a very good question." A hush spreads through the room, the kind that only comes when something real is about to be said. He takes a moment. Not because he doesn't know the answer, because this answer, whatever it may be, matters. The cameras zoom in, capturing the rare moment of hesitation on his face. Then, Warren Buffett does something unexpected. He looks down for a second, just a flicker of movement, as if the question has pulled him somewhere else, somewhere far from Wall Street, far from stock tickers and quarterly reports. When he lifts his gaze again, it's not the billionaire speaking, it's the man. The silence stretches, thick with expectation. The audience is used to Warren Buffett having answers, quick, sharp, and wrapped in a layer of Midwestern charm. He's known for his wit, his ability to distill complex financial principles into simple wisdom. But this time, he doesn't answer right away. Instead, he smiles, warm, almost wistful, but there's something behind it, a hesitation. He exhales softly, looking down at the table, running his fingers along the edge of his Diet Coke can. The subtle pause unsettles the room more than any immediate answer would have. A journalist near the front shifts in his seat, sensing the weight of the moment. Another glances at her laptop screen, realizing she's stopped taking notes. Buffett's hesitation isn't one of uncertainty. It's something deeper, something personal. The audience isn't sure what to expect. Some lean forward, anticipating a clever remark. Others brace for a classic, Buffett-style redirection, something light-hearted but insightful. But what happens next is something entirely different. When Buffett finally looks up, his expression isn't one of a billionaire or a business mogul. It's the look of a man who has lived long enough to know that the things most people chase aren't always the things that matter. And when he speaks, his voice is softer than before. Well, he says, adjusting his glasses slightly, that depends on what you think rich really means. The young girl doesn't blink. She just waits. The room, hundreds of people, financial experts, journalists, analysts, waits with her. Something is shifting, and they all know it. For a man who has built an empire on numbers, Warren Buffett suddenly looks like he's thinking about something that can't be measured. His eyes, usually sharp with calculated wisdom, soften, not in the way a businessman softens to close a deal, but in the way a person does when a memory pulls them somewhere they haven't been in a long time. A slow breath in, a brief glance downward, and then, just for a second, the impossible happens. Warren. Buffett's eyes glisten. It's not dramatic, not some overwhelming flood of emotion, but it's there. A brief shimmer of something raw, something real. The shift is small, but it's enough. Enough for the front row of journalists to notice, enough for the cameras to zoom in, enough for the room filled with people trained to dissect every move, of a billionaire to feel the atmosphere change. A younger Buffett might have masked it, laughed it off, or thrown out a clever quip to lighten the moment. But now he just lets the silence sit. He takes another breath, slower this time. The girl is still watching him, patient, expectant, as if she knows he's about to say something that matters. And for the first time in a very, very long time, Warren Buffett isn't thinking about money. He's thinking about something money can't touch. Then finally, he speaks. "When I was a boy," he says, voice quieter now, "I thought being rich meant having more than everyone else." He stops, just for a second. Then in the stillness of the room, he adds, "I was wrong." The room, once buzzing with the relentless energy of financial analysts and journalists, is now unnervingly still. Warren Buffett adjusts his glasses, but it's not a gesture of thought. It's almost as if he needs a moment to steady himself before stepping back in time. "When I was young," he says, his voice quieter than usual, "my father would come home late from work, tired but happy." His words land differently than anything else he's said today. They don't carry the weight of billions or boardroom decisions. They carry something heavier. The journalists in the front row who came expecting sound bites about market trends instinctively lean forward. This isn't the Warren Buffett they know. This isn't a lesson on compounding interest or stock valuation. This is something entirely different. Buffett glances down at his hands for just a fraction of a second before continuing. "We didn't have much," he says, "but we had dinner together every night." A few of the older journalists exchange glances. Some of them know what it's like to come from little, others don't. But all of them understand one thing. This isn't just a memory. This is the memory. Buffett looks up again, and his eyes aren't scanning the room for reactions. He's somewhere else now, somewhere far from Wall Street. "My mother would set the table, and no matter how hard the day had been, my dad always walked through that door with a smile. Always. His voice isn't as steady as it was before. Something is unfolding here, something delicate. The audience can feel it, even if they don't fully understand where it's going. The world measures wealth in numbers, Buffett says, his voice steady but carrying a weight no balance sheet could ever hold. But back then, sitting at that table with my family, I already had everything I could ever need. The young girl is still standing, gripping the microphone, and in that moment, in a packed room full of people who have built careers chasing wealth, no one says a word. Because for the first time in his long and storied career, Warren Buffett isn't talking about money. He's talking about something far more valuable. The silence in the room is heavier now, not just a pause but an absence of everything. No pens scratching against notepads, no whispered side conversations, no camera clicks. Just stillness. Buffett takes a breath, and when he speaks, his voice carries the weight of a truth that has taken a lifetime to understand. One evening, he says, his gaze distant, as if he's seeing something far beyond the walls of the conference hall. My dad put his hand on my shoulder. The way he says it, my dad, makes it clear this isn't just another anecdote. This isn't a lesson rehearsed for shareholders or a feel-good remark for the press. This is real. He blinks once, slowly, then looks straight ahead. His voice drops just a little, making the room lean in even closer. He said, "Warren, you'll be rich if you have people who truly love you when you're old." His voice catches, just slightly. It's not something most people would notice, but in a room full of trained observers, everyone does. The young girl's fingers tighten around the microphone. Her wide eyes lock onto his, absorbing every syllable. Somewhere near the back, a journalist lowers his phone. Another, a woman who has spent her career covering high-stakes financial deals, presses her lips together, her eyes flickering, with something she wasn't expecting to feel at a business conference. Buffett doesn't move for a long moment. He just lets the words settle, lets them fill the air, lets them reach the people who have spent their entire lives chasing a different kind of wealth. The weight of it is inescapable. Not a single person speaks because deep down, in a way, no spreadsheet or stock portfolio could ever quantify, they all know. That single sentence is worth more than anything Warren Buffett has ever owned. The silence lingers for a few beats too long. Then a soft murmur ripples through the room, quiet at first, like the shifting of uneasy thoughts, then growing just enough to be noticed. Journalists exchange quick glances, some lifting their eyebrows, others shifting in their seats. They had come, armed with questions about economic forecasts, the state of inflation, maybe even a soundbite about AI in the stock market. But this isn't the answer they expected. No market predictions, no portfolio strategies, no corporate wisdom, just a simple, undeniable truth. A journalist near the front, a man with salt and pepper hair who's covered Buffett for decades, leans back slightly as if reassessing everything he thought he knew about the billionaire. His pen, once moving furiously across his notepad, now rests forgotten between his fingers. Further back, a younger reporter, fresh from business school, stares at his laptop screen where he was halfway through typing a headline. He hesitates, blinking, then slowly deletes the half-written words. This wasn't just another press conference, it was something else entirely. A financial analyst, seated beside a Bloomberg correspondent, exhales through her nose, shaking her head slightly. "Did you expect that?" she whispers. The correspondent doesn't answer. He just keeps watching Buffett as if trying to understand what just happened. The camera operators, usually indifferent to the content of these conferences, subtly adjust their angles. They, too, sense that this moment is different. Buffett hasn't moved much. He hasn't rushed to explain himself or fill the silence. He just watches the room, watching them grapple with the answer he gave. And for a group of people trained to break down the complexities of wealth, there's an unsettling realization spreading among them. For all their experience, for all their knowledge of stocks, mergers, And billion-dollar deals. Not a single one of them had ever truly defined richness the way Warren Buffett just had. The girl's fingers tighten around the microphone, her knuckles turning pale as she grips it. She blinks once, twice, as if trying to hold back something too big to process all at once. Her wide eyes shimmer under the conference lights, but she isn't embarrassed. She doesn't look away, doesn't try to mask her emotions like so many in the room are doing right now. Instead, she lets herself feel it. "That's beautiful," she whispers, her voice so soft that if the room wasn't deathly silent, no, one would have heard it. A single tear slips down her cheek. She isn't wiping it away. Somewhere in the front row, a journalist who's spent years covering cutthroat financial battles feels his throat tighten unexpectedly. He shifts in his seat, glancing down at his notepad, as if trying to shake off whatever has just hit him. Near the back, a woman with a CNBC press badge slowly lowers her phone. She was recording, but now she just watches. The room, filled with people who analyze wealth for a living, is seeing something wealth can't buy: raw, human emotion. Buffett notices. Of course, he does. His own expression softens, but he doesn't speak. He just watches the girl, this stranger, this child, who had asked a question no one else had dared to ask. And suddenly, it doesn't feel like a press conference anymore. It feels like something real. For the first time, the cameras in the room aren't capturing the usual spectacle of a billionaire's words dissected for market influence. They're capturing something far rarer, a moment of truth. Buffett watches the girl for a moment longer, the tear still glistening on her cheek. Then, slowly, he leans forward, resting his arms on the table. His voice is steady, but there's something softer in it now, something that makes every person in the room listen just a little closer. "Money can buy comfort," he says, his fingers lightly tapping the table, as if considering his next words. "It can buy a nice house, good health care, a sense of security." The audience nods almost instinctively. This is the Warren Buffett they know, the one who speaks in measured, practical truths. But then he exhales just slightly, and his tone shifts. "What it can't buy," he continues, his voice quieter now, "is a single person who'll hold your hand when you're scared." The air in the room changes again. The journalists don't look at each other this time. They don't need to. A lump forms in a few throats. Some stare ahead, frozen, as if struck by something they hadn't been prepared for. Buffett doesn't stop. "It won't bring back the moments you wish you had spent differently," he says. His eyes sweep over the crowd, not in the way a speaker commands an audience, but in the way a man who has lived long enough to know something looks at people who are just beginning to understand. Another pause, this one longer, more deliberate. Then he speaks again, and his voice carries a weight that no market report ever could. "True wealth," he says, "is love and time." There is no applause, not yet. Not because the words aren't powerful, but because they're still sinking in. Love and time. Two things the richest people in the world cannot buy back. The young girl inhales shakily, still holding the microphone, but she doesn't speak. She doesn't have to. The people in the room, many of whom have spent their entire lives measuring success in dollars, are feeling something unsettling, something unfamiliar. They are questioning what they have spent their lives chasing, and for the first time, in a room full of some of the most financially successful people on the planet, no one is thinking about money. The energy in the room shifts in a way that no one quite knows how to handle. For the first time in years, a Warren Buffett press conference isn't being transcribed in real time. Laptops remain open but untouched. Fingers hover over keyboards, frozen between the urge to document and the need to simply sit with what was just said. A Wall Street analyst in the third row, known for his ruthless approach to market predictions, stares blankly ahead, his pen resting idle against his notepad. The usual incessant tap, tap, tap of live tweets and financial blog updates is absent. A journalist from the Financial Times, a woman who has covered market crashes and billionaire power plays for 2 decades, blinks rapidly, pressing a tissue against the corner of her eye. She does it discreetly, as if trying to convince herself it's just the dry air in the room. In the back, a man from Bloomberg crosses his arms, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. He wasn't expecting to feel something today. He was expecting earnings reports, stock forecasts, maybe a clever Buffett one-liner to quote in an article. Instead, he's staring at his blank screen, realizing there's no statistic, no chart, no economic model that could capture this. Buffett watches the crowd, his expression unreadable. He's not waiting for applause. He's not waiting for the next question. He's waiting for them to sit with it, to let the weight of his words settle in their bones. In the front row, a finance executive shifts his grip on his expensive Mont Blanc pen, tapping it absent-mindedly against the edge of his leather notebook. His entire career has been built around the pursuit of wealth, yet, for the first time, he finds himself wondering if he even understands what wealth truly is. And then there's the girl, still standing, still holding the microphone. Her eyes move across the room, watching grown men and women, titans of industry, seasoned reporters, market analysts, grapple with something they can't quite put into words. She came expecting an answer. She didn't expect to change a room full of people with just one question. A slow breath spreads through the conference hall. Some lower their heads, some cross their arms, as if trying to shield themselves from the reality of what they've just heard. For the first time, this isn't about Warren Buffett, it's about them and the choices they've made. The room is still frozen in the weight of Buffett's words, the air thick with an emotion no one had anticipated. Buffett, the man who has spent decades at the top of the financial world, the man who has outmaneuvered markets and built an empire, suddenly lowers his gaze. He takes off his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose as if trying to hold something back. But it's there. The slight tremble in his fingers as he adjusts the frames before slipping them back on. The barely perceptible tightening of his jaw, a billionaire on the verge of tears. A few journalists glance at each other, unsure if they should document this or simply witness it. Cameras zoom in, capturing the rarest sight of all. Not power, not control, but vulnerability. He exhales through his nose, his voice quieter than before. "I've met a lot of rich people who are very poor," he says, the words slow, deliberate. Few heads lift. A reporter near the back, who had already drafted a headline about market trends, hesitates. His fingers rest on the keyboard, but he doesn't type. Buffett lets the statement settle before continuing. "And I've met some so-called poor people," he says, glancing toward the young girl, "who are the wealthiest I've ever known." Something shifts in his voice, an almost imperceptible break. The girl doesn't say anything. She just nods. And in that moment, as Warren Buffett looks at her, it's as if he's seeing something beyond the here and now. The choices he's made, the people he's known, the wealth he's accumulated, and the wealth he hasn't. The cameras continue rolling, but no one dares interrupt. Because in that moment, Warren Buffett, the billionaire, the legend, the financial oracle, is just a man. A man who understands, perhaps better than ever before, that the richest moments in life have nothing to do with money. At first, it's just one person, a single pair of hands clapping near the back, hesitant, uncertain. Then another, a journalist. In the front row stands, pressing his notepad to his chest, his applause steady and deliberate. And then, like a ripple turning into a wave, the room erupts. People rise from their seats, not out of obligation, not because it's expected, but because something inside them demands it. The applause is thunderous, rolling through the conference hall in a way that no market forecast or investment insight ever has. Some clap slowly, lost in thought. Others, more emphatic, as if moved in a way they can't quite explain. A CNBC correspondent wipes at his eyes before realizing the cameras are still rolling. A Wall Street executive, a man who has spent his life calculating profits and losses, exhales sharply before standing, rubbing his jaw as if trying to shake off the lump forming in his throat. Even the hardest skeptics, the ones who came for nothing more than numbers and economic projections, are standing now. Buffett doesn't move at first. He simply watches, his expression unreadable. But then his lips curve into a small, knowing smile. He's been applauded before, on stages, in boardrooms, in stadiums filled with investors. But this is different. This isn't about business. This is about something deeper. The young girl is still standing, looking up at him, her eyes wide. She doesn't clap. She just watches him, absorbing everything, as if she knows she has just witnessed something that will be remembered for a long, long time. Buffett finally nods, just slightly, as if acknowledging not just the applause, but the shift in the air. The standing ovation continues, people clapping, not just for him, but for the truth he spoke, for the moment that changed everything. It happens almost instantly. Even before the applause dies down, phones are out. Screens glow as reporters type furiously, fingers flying over keyboards. Cameras zoom in, capturing the rare, emotional moment. A billionaire reflecting on wealth in a way no one expected. Within minutes, Twitter explodes. Trending. True wealth. True. Wealth is love and time. Warren Buffett just redefined what it means to be rich, and I'm not okay. A finance insider. Forget market predictions. Buffett just delivered the most powerful financial insight of our generation, and it has nothing to do with money. True wealth. Wall-less journalist. A young girl just asked Warren Buffett what it means to be rich. His answer will be quoted for generations. Forbes, live by the time Buffett steps off stage, news anchors are already cutting into their segments. CNBC, breaking news, Warren Buffett delivers unexpected, emotional answer about wealth. Bloomberg, Buffett's viral moment, true wealth is love and time, takes over the internet. The New York Times, a simple question, an answer that shook the business world. Clips of the moment flood TikTok, Instagram and YouTube. The footage of Buffett's glistening eyes, his hand adjusting his glasses, his words hanging in the air. It spreads like wildfire. A financial conference that was supposed to be about economic trends has now become a cultural moment. Comment sections fill with thousands of reactions. I came for investment advice. I left questioning my entire life. Buffett just gave the richest answer of his career, and it had nothing to do with money. This one moment changed my perspective forever. Even celebrities weigh in. Billionaire CEOs, politicians, athletes, actors. Everyone has an opinion. Some praise Buffett's wisdom. Others debate whether money really plays no role in happiness. But no matter which side they take, one thing is undeniable. This moment is everywhere. By evening, every major network is airing it. Morning show's schedule, discussions for the next day, talk show hosts prep segments around it, universities start planning lectures on it, and the young girl who asked the question? She has no idea yet how big this has become, because what started as a simple press conference, what started as one question, has now become a global conversation. The media doesn't take long to track her down. At first, she's just the girl who made Warren Buffett pause, the mysterious child with the simple yet profound question that stopped one of the world's greatest financial minds in his tracks. But within hours, journalists are digging, who is she? A few shaky cell phone videos capture her as she leaves the conference hall, her small frame lost in a sea of reporters. She isn't answering questions. She looks overwhelmed, her mother guiding her through the crowd, shielding her from the flashing cameras. And then, late that night, the first real details emerge. Her name is Emma Carter, 12 years old, from a small town in Indiana, and her question wasn't random. It wasn't a stunt. It came from a place of loss. CNN breaking news, the girl who humbled Warren Buffett, Emma Carter's story. Emma's father, Daniel Carter, was a middle school teacher. He didn't make much money, never owned a big house, never had investments. But to Emma, he was the richest man she'd ever known. Until 2 months ago, when he passed away from a sudden illness, leaving Emma and her mother to navigate life without him. Her mother, Sarah Carter, now works extra shifts at a local diner. The bills have piled up. The weight of loss has been unbearable, and yet Emma never once thought of her father as poor, because he was there. Every night at dinner, every weekend at the park. Every time she needed a hand to hold, he taught her how to ride a bike, how to bake cookies, how to love books. He never missed a school play. He made her feel safe, even when the world outside their little home wasn't. So, when she asked Warren Buffett, what does it really mean to be rich? She wasn't just asking for herself. She was asking because she already knew the answer. The story spreads like wildfire. People who had once just watched the viral moment now feel it. They understand why Buffett was shaken, why the moment hit so deep. Because a little girl who had lost the richest person she'd ever known had just reminded the world that money was never the measure of wealth to begin with. The next morning, as the world is still buzzing over her question, Emma Carter wakes up to something she never expected. A call, not from a news station, not from a journalist looking for another interview, from Warren Buffett's office. Her mother, Sarah, nearly drops the phone when she hears the voice on the other end. Mr. Buffett would like to meet with you and Emma personally. Sarah grips the phone tighter, unsure if she's still dreaming. What? He was deeply moved by Emma's question. He'd like to talk to her. And the assistant pauses, then adds, he has something important he wants to offer. Emma, sitting at their small kitchen table, stares at her mother as she listens. The apartment is quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Her mother presses a hand to her forehead. I don't know what to say. Say yes. The assistant's voice is warm. This is an opportunity that could change everything. By noon, news of the call leaks. CNBC, Buffett reaches out to viral. 12-year-old, he wants to meet her. Forbes, what's next for Emma Carter? A personal invitation from Warren Buffett himself. Twitter erupts. Is Buffett meets Emma. Trends worldwide. Speculation runs wild. Is Buffett offering financial support? A mentorship? a role at one of his companies in the future. No one knows yet. But one thing is clear, Emma Carter's life is about to change. The conversation explodes beyond financial circles, turning into a full-scale global debate. Buffett's words, "True wealth is love and time," become a rallying cry for some and a point of contention for others. The praise philosophers, educators, and public figures applaud the statement, calling it one of the most profound moments in modern finance. Oprah Winfrey tweets, "Warren Buffett just reminded the world what real wealth is: love, time, connection. If you're not rich in these, money means nothing." True wealth. Harvard Business Review publishes an op-ed. Buffett's wisdom challenges us to rethink success. In the end, fulfillment isn't measured in net worth, it's measured in the love we leave behind. Mental health professionals join in, emphasizing that while money provides stability, genuine happiness comes from relationships and purpose. Dr. Lisa Feldman, psychologist. We've studied happiness for decades. Buffett is right. Wealth without connection leads to loneliness. People with deep relationships live longer, healthier, and more meaningful lives. The criticism that everyone agrees. High-profile economists and Wall Street analysts argue that financial security is essential for happiness. CNBC's Jim Cramer. I respect Buffett, but let's be real. Money matters. Try telling someone struggling to pay rent that love and time are enough. Wealth gives you freedom, options, and security. Social media debates explode. Easy for a billionaire to say money doesn't matter. Buffett's right. If you have no one to share it with, all the money in the world is meaningless. We need balance, love, and financial security. Both matter. The unexpected. Voices, athletes, actors, even politicians weigh in. LeBron James. At the end of the day, championships, contracts, and fame don't matter if you don't have people who love you. Buffett spoke the truth. Elon Musk, replying to a tweet about Buffett's statement, "Love is important, but financial security enables freedom. Both should be valued." A heated debate emerges between those who believe happiness is built on love and time and those who argue financial wealth is a critical part of the equation. Meanwhile, amidst all the noise, the one person who started it all, Emma Carter, has no idea how massive this has become. She's just waiting for the moment she gets to sit across from Warren Buffett and hear what he has to say next. Months pass, but Warren Buffett's words refuse to fade. It starts with motivational speakers. Business leaders begin referencing the moment in their keynotes. TED Talks dissect it. College commencement speeches borrow it. Universities add it to their economics and philosophy courses, discussing the balance between financial success and personal fulfillment. A Yale professor publishes a study. Does true wealth align with Buffett's definition? The findings reveal that people who prioritize relationships and time over relentless financial gain report higher life satisfaction. Buffett's quote becomes a staple in leadership books. CEOs reference it in company values statements. Mental health advocates use it to push back against burnout culture. Even religious leaders incorporate it into sermons about purpose and fulfillment. Emma's story inspires millions. Emma Carter's question and her father's story becomes a symbol of what truly matters. Best-selling book titled True Wealth, A Lesson from Warren Buffett and a Young Girl's Question is published, written by a journalist who covered the event. Documentaries feature Emma and her journey, highlighting her late father's wisdom that wealth was never about money, but about presence, love, and the moments that can't be bought back. People start sharing their own reflections. I walked away from a high-stress job to spend more time with my family because of Buffett's words. I was chasing the wrong things. This moment made me rethink everything. This changed my life. Buffett reflects on the moment that defined him. Years later, in one of his final interviews, Warren Buffett is asked about his most significant moments. He doesn't mention billion-dollar deals. He doesn't talk about stock market victories. Instead, he smiles, leans back in his chair and says, "A little girl once asked me what it really means to be rich, and she already knew the answer." The clip plays over and over in tribute videos as people remember the moment that changed the way the world thought about wealth. And somewhere, Emma Carter, now grown, now living a life rich in love and time, still carries those words with her. Because a simple question changed everything. A decade later, the world has changed. The stock market has gone through its highs and lows. New billionaires have risen and old financial empires have evolved. But one thing remains. Warren Buffett's words continue to ripple across generations. And for Emma Carter, now 22, the moment that changed her life still feels as clear as if it had happened yesterday. She sits on a quiet stage at a university auditorium, facing a crowd of students eager to hear her story. The event isn't about finance or wealth management, it's about purpose. A moderator leans forward, smiling warmly. "Emma, it's been 10 years since you asked Warren Buffett that unforgettable question. Looking back, how did that moment shape you?" Emma exhales, a nostalgic smile forming on her lips. The lights above cast a soft glow on her face, and she hesitates, not because she doesn't know what to say, but because she wants to say it right. "I remember the way the room felt," she says. "I remember the silence after I asked the question. And I remember Warren Buffett looking at me, not as a billionaire, not as an investment guru, but as a man who understood something deeper than money." The audience listens intently. They've read about her story. They've seen the viral moment in documentaries and news segments. But what they don't know is how that one answer shaped the course of her life. "I didn't go into finance," she continues, "not because I don't think money matters. It does. Financial security is important. But I realized something that day." She pauses. "I wanted to be rich in the way my dad was." The room is quiet. "My father was a teacher," she explains. "He didn't make much, but he gave his time, his love, his presence. And I realized that was the kind of wealth I wanted too." Emma had used the scholarship Buffett offered to study education and psychology. Instead of chasing Wall Street, she chose a different path, one where she could give back, where she could make time for people the way her father always did for her. "I became a teacher," she says, smiling. "Just like my dad." The crowd reacts, some with knowing nods, others visibly moved. "I get to spend my life helping kids realize their worth isn't just measured in numbers, and every single time I step into a classroom, I carry Warren Buffett's words with me." She looks out at the audience, locking eyes with the students who are just starting to figure out their own paths. "You'll all chase different things in life," she says. "Success, stability, accomplishments, and that's okay. But never forget that the richest life isn't about how much you earn, it's about how much love and time you give." A soft, steady applause spreads through the room. It isn't thunderous like that standing ovation a decade ago, but it's genuine. Emma Carter is no longer the little girl who asked Warren Buffett what it means to be rich. She is a woman who now knows the answer. The sun is setting over Omaha, casting long golden streaks through the windows of Warren Buffett's modest home. Despite his legendary status, his surroundings remain simple. His old wooden desk, stacks of letters, and a few framed photos lining the walls. At 90-something, He's slower now. His hands tremble slightly as he lifts an envelope from the pile of mail beside him. It's handwritten. No return address, just for Mr. Buffett, scrawled neatly across the front. Carefully, he opens it. Dear Mr. Buffett, you may not remember me, but 10 years ago, I was the little girl who asked you what it really meant to be rich. I wanted to write to you, not as a journalist, not for an interview, but just as someone whose life changed because of a few simple words. You told me that true wealth wasn't about money. It was love and time. I didn't fully understand it then, but I do now. I chose to be a teacher, just like my father. Every day I stand in front of students and I try to give them the same thing you gave me that day, a different way of looking at the world. Because of you, I don't measure my life in dollars, but in moments. In the laughter of my students, in the time I spend with my mother, in the quiet mornings before school when I sit with my coffee and remember my dad. You gave me more than a scholarship. You gave me something that will last far beyond money. You gave me perspective, and for that, I will always be grateful. With love and time, Emma Carter Buffett exhales slowly, his fingers tracing the edge of the letter. His eyes glisten, just as they had that day in the conference hall all those years ago. A small smile pulls at his lips. He leans back in his chair, the paper resting gently in his lap. Outside, the late afternoon light spills across the room, soft and golden. For all the wealth he has accumulated, for all the deals he has closed, this feels like his greatest return on investment. He folds the letter carefully and sets it aside, glancing out the window, lost in thought.